Today we have an opportunity to sit down, and I have the pleasure of sitting with Sergeant Todd Mitchell, who's over our homicide squad. Todd, a lot of the times when there are officer-involved critical incidents, you and your team have the opportunity to go out and investigate those. And according to Utah Code 762408, the statute was recently changed where we, as Salt Lake City PD, can no longer investigate our own incidents.
Based on the law that you just quoted, the last legislative session, the legislature passed the law 762408 that basically says that another agency has to conduct the investigation. So a brief history of that is it was passed in May of last year. It actually took effect so that we couldn't conduct our own investigation. So at that time, we reached out to Unified Police Department in West Valley and said, can we cover each other? Can you investigate ours? We'll investigate yours, so that we can be in compliance with the state law. Now the law took effect in that month, in May, but the law also states that by December of 2015, we actually have to have a written protocol that we have to be able to put on our website so that the community as a whole can see what governs us, how they're handled, and who would handle that investigation.
And you know, the whole idea behind this, Todd, was that so that we conducted our interviews so they're done professionally, thoroughly, and impartially. I mean, the whole idea was that we were open and transparent with the whole process. Now, I know the process at times takes weeks and even months, but perhaps you can explain a little bit about when we have an incident, how does the protocol, how is it invoked, who responds, and what it actually transpires at the scene?
Okay, I'd love to. So basically, when an officer-involved critical incident occurs, whether it be like an officer-involved shooting, some sort of force that is used on someone that qualifies for the critical incident under the state law, then that home agency will reach out to what's called the coordinator of the protocol. Currently, the protocol coordinator is Bob Schober, who is West Jordan Lieutenant over their investigations. So let's just take, for instance, if Salt Lake City is involved in an officer-involved shooting. Okay, let's just use that for an example. Then our watch commander, who is responding, who is on duty, would contact my lieutenant, who's the investigative administrative lieutenant. They would then call Lieutenant Schober with West Jordan and say, we've just been involved in a critical incident. We need an outside agency to respond. So then Lieutenant Schober would look and see which team was up. And there's a lot of variables in that. There's currently 3 teams.
Right. And yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the makeup of these teams. When you say unified, or if you say West Valley has a team, they kind of lead it, as do our Salt Lake City team, but who is actually on that team?
Okay, for instance, we'll talk about Salt Lake City's team. We wouldn't investigate our own, but when I get the call, I'm a team leader, and it would be the Salt Lake City-led team. Currently, I have my 6 homicide investigators, and then I would also call out my other agencies. For instance, I have 10 other detectives from different agencies throughout the valley. Example, I have Murray, the Attorney General's office, South Jordan, 10 other agencies that I would reach out to, and I would have them respond to. It depends on the level of the call out. For instance, on the last one that we investigated for West Valley, I ended up calling out my 6 detectives and 4 other detectives because the staffing levels, I didn't need 10 other detectives. On the one where we investigated where Officer Barney was killed, I called out my entire team. I called out my 6 detectives, all 10 detectives from the other agencies, and some additional Salt Lake City resources, because that just depends on the scope of the investigation.
Right. The whole idea is that we bring some of the best and brightest investigators in this valley together so that we can look at these incidents, and we can create a very objective process from which meaningful and valuable conclusions can be drawn.
Yes, that is true. The goal of the officer-involved critical incident team is to respond. It's basically a fact-finding mission or objective. We go and we're going to try to find out what happened, what happened truthfully there. We put the package together, and then we'll present it to the district attorney's office, who will then make a determination of did the officer was the officer's actions justified or not justified? If they're not justified, what criminal culpability does the officer have? Also, what criminal culpability or charges should or would be brought against the person that we used force against? We as a team are trying to just find out what happened. Our goal is not to judge it. It's not to steer it in any direction. It's just to find the facts, present that entire package or the entire facts to the district attorney's office, whose job it is to make those determinations.
And so just to reiterate, this is, and the only thing you're looking at from this investigation is the criminal proceeding.
So there's the possibility in every officer involved critical incident of 3 separate investigations. There's the criminal investigation that is going to look at the aspects of or look at what caused that incident to occur. The person that we used force against, what were they doing? Should there be charges brought against them? Then there's the protocol investigation, and the goal of the protocol investigation is to look at the officer's actions to see if they were within the law, well, not policy, because that's the third one, sorry, whether they're within the law, and then we present that. Sometimes we can do both investigations together, but we're in communication with the district attorney's office, and at some point we may have to split that. And if I were to split that investigation, then I would say, Detective A, you're now the protocol investigator, and you're only looking, and that part of the team is only going to be looking at the officer's conduct. Then I would split it into a criminal investigation and have separate investigators looking at that. There's a lot of factors, and like I said, we're in communication with the district attorney's office of if we need to split that out. They would look at the subject that we used force on, or that the officer used force on, and see that. And there's the third, which is the internal affairs, which will be handled by that department's internal affairs unit. For instance, if it's us, then your internal affairs would look at that.
And that investigation would really just focus on department policies.
Yes. And again, if we go back to that criminal investigation, that actually can be split out right at the onset of it. For instance, let's just take an example. If we have someone that commits a crime in the Sugar House area, as an example, they end up committing a crime, they carjack someone. Salt Lake City police officers get in a pursuit, they chase them throughout the valley, and it ends up in West Valley City. Something occurs in West Valley City where the officer, for an example, shoots and kills the suspect that did the carjacking. Well, the protocol team can take that whole thing and investigate it. Or it can be split out and Salt Lake City can investigate the carjacking and the crime that occurred there. So there's a lot of variables. We can split it however the district attorney's office decides, and the protocol and the home agency can do it. Again, we're just looking for the protocol portion is just trying to figure out the officer's actions, were they justified or not. But we can encompass everything. Okay. And it just depends on the situation.
Let's talk a little bit about the investigation, the pieces of evidence, and in particularly body camera footage.
So I get the call out. We as a team respond out to the scene. We'll do the investigation. We collect the evidence as the protocol team, investigating team. The home agency doesn't collect it. Basically, we'll respond. We'll take over the scene. The venue agency steps back and allows us to come in and take that portion. So as far as evidence, we'll take the evidence, with the exception of body camera video. That we get copies of it. So we control the video for the investigation portion of it, but the home agency also has that video. Now, I think the important part is this whole process. We're one of the first agencies in the state to have, most of our officers have body cameras, okay? Mm-hmm. So we're kind of on the cutting edge, or we're kind of learning as we go. So as we work through this process, we're learning, well, you want to think of body cam video as just something that we can release. Well, we need to focus on it's not. It's just like any other piece of evidence. And we need to protect that, because that body cam video then becomes evidence in a criminal proceedings.
Right, right.
So if we, sorry, go ahead.
And I want to make one point. A lot of people think that the body footage, the body camera footage evidence, or what they have, is really the end-all, tell-all. And many times in these investigations, people forget about what transpired before, what led up to the officers being on scene, the footage and then actually what happens after.
Yes, it is. For instance, I'm not going to take that body cam video and take it over to the district attorney's office and have them watch it right away. The district attorney doesn't want that. What they would like is they want that whole package, the whole picture of everybody's viewpoint. They want all the witness statements. They want all the video, which we'll give them. And they want it as a package so they can see it from the different viewpoints.
Right.
So they're going to hold off on that. Again, it's not the end-all, tell-all. I've been involved in quite a few of these investigations. And the body cam video is important, but it's important to remember that that's just one view.
Right.
From that officer's, wherever if it's here or mounted on the head, that's just one view or one picture of a scene, of what the totality of the circumstances are. Our goal as a team is to take that, put that piece in that total picture, then present it to the district attorney's office, who, from what I've seen, has done a great job. They're independent, and they sift through all the evidence, and they sift through everything we give them to make sure that we do a good job and that their findings are accurate and that they reflect what happened in the big picture, and that so that they can answer to the community as a whole to say this was a complete picture of what happened and this is our findings.
At the end of the day, after this investigation is completed and thorough, or completed and done, Todd and his team or another sergeant in their team would go and present the facts to the district attorney's office, and from there, Sim Gill has the responsibility to render a decision of finding on this investigation. And it is his opinion that all the evidence, including the body camera footage, is evidence of this investigation and should not be released at any time prior to him having a chance to review it and making a finding. Is that correct, Todd?
That's correct. And I don't know how much you want to get into the little details of it, but let's just take an example of, well, let's walk through it. Sim has stated that the body cam video is evidence, and the rules of evidence apply to the body cam video, and that's his stance. So there's different times that you can release the video. For instance, his opinion and our opinion at this point is we're not going to release any video until this case has been presented to the district attorney's office. Now then you kind of fold into a couple different points of, okay, the reason we do that is we want a fair and impartial hearing of the facts, and to protect that evidence in case the officer is charged or the person that force was used against is charged. So we can't do anything until we get to that screening process and Sim Gill and the district attorney's office decides, are criminal charges going to be filed against any of the parties involved in this incident? Now, for instance, if he says no, the officer's actions were justified, then we could release it, except for we need to look and see, okay, so the person that force was used against, is criminal charges coming against them? Then that evidence has to remain as evidence and held back so that that person can have a fair and impartial trial. Now, if the person is killed in that use of force, then there's no criminal charges. Then it can be released at that point. If the officer's actions were justified, he's ruled that, the person's deceased, there's no criminal charges, there's no criminal process that's going to occur, so that's no longer needed as evidence down the road. However, if that person lives and criminal charges go against them, then we're talking months, and I'm sorry, we're talking years.
Right.
That case then becomes the district attorney's case. They take the case, we've done our job as a protocol team, and we've handed the case over to them, and they're the ones that handle that.
Right, and so really, there's not a clear-cut line in the sand or an easy decision as to when this evidence, the body cam footage, would be released. It's all kind of...
There's too many factors to really give a definite answer, and we've had these conversations, and I've heard it from you that the day that we can release it, we'll release it for good, right, bad, or indifferent. We're trying to be transparent, but being transparent doesn't allow us to be, to release stuff prior to the deadlines or when it's proper.
In these investigations, transparency doesn't equal immediacy. The protocol was set up for the community. It's set up for the citizens, the agencies who serve them, and the police officers who have to make split-second decisions. The protocol is really set up to make sure that we have a thorough and a complete investigation.
Yes, it is. And that's what I've seen in these investigations as we've proceeded, or as we've gone forward. Looking back since last May, we've been involved in several, whether we're investigating them or it's our agency that's been involved, and it's working. I can't see a time that it hasn't worked. If the community as a whole wants transparency and they want to be able to trust this system, this is what's been set up, and from my vantage point, it's working. We have an outside agency come in. We have little to no involvement other than providing them with the video off of our databases. Whatever they request, we provide for them. And when I take my team out into the other agencies throughout the valley, that's what I'm getting from them too, is they're stepping back, they're allowing us as an investigative team to come in and do that independent investigation. When I ask them for different reports or different videos, they've been forthcoming immediately. They want that transparency, or they want that ability to say, look, we're taking a step back, we're allowing the process to work. The problem, part of the problem with the process is, and it's just built in our judicial system, it takes time. Right. I would love to be able to go forward on day one and say, here's all the video, here's all the evidence we've gathered, this is direction. But again, we fall back on rules of evidence. Right. We have to maintain that. If we look at any other investigation, we as a government entity are required to protect that so that it can go into the court process and be that big picture. We don't release code R kits. We don't release crime scene photos. It's not because we don't want to be transparent. It's because we have to safeguard all the parties' interest in this, whether it's the person we're charging, because we don't want an unfair trial. I don't want to charge the wrong person. I don't want the wrong person convicted. That's one of my greatest fears, is I send an innocent person to prison. We need to safeguard these things, and that's the goal. And that's what I've seen throughout this whole process.
I completely agree. That's the one thing that is very difficult right after a situation occurs, that you can't explain everything you would like. In time, we will. And I think it's very important for people to understand it as these investigations roll out. We will provide everything we possibly can. It is the goal of the Salt Lake City Police Department to be as open and as transparent as possible. And I want the citizens of Salt Lake to rest assured that that is the end goal, and that is the kind of the end goal for the entire officer-involved critical incident protocol.